Well, it's Tuesday and we're 1 week away from midterm elections in the United States. The November 6 polls are essentially a referendum on Donald Trump's presidency. It's been a turbulent few weeks with a string of explosive devices sent to prominent Democrats, followed by Saturday's deadly shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. At the very least, these midterms will be remembered for their emotional intensity. Former State Department diplomat William Jordan joins us now for a closer look at where the chips could fall. Welcome back to the program, William.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Now let's start off by looking at what the latest acts of violence mean politically. Trump has in part blamed the media for the vitriol and the deep partisan divisions. His critics say that Trump's own rhetoric is what's stoking hatred. Can you talk a little bit more, first of all, about how the events of the past 2 weeks are further polarizing the electorate?
I think for a lot of people in the U.S., what's happened has sort of justified their worst fears about what Trump and sort of Trumpism and sort of the ways that Trump in particular expresses himself and finds echoes in the social media in the United States. The possibility that that could actually lead to people acting out these sort of angry, fearful impulses that Trump stokes. I think it's important to point out, as many observers have been doing in the United States, that a lot of this is not new, and it underscores how Trump is more symptomatic and representative of things that have been building for a long time in the United States, these tensions, this polarization, this, as I said, sense of fear and insecurity among a lot of people in the country. And he has, the thing that propelled him to the head of the pack among Republican hopefuls in 2016 was the fact that he knew how to harness this undercurrent and to, in some ways, empower people who felt disenfranchised or not listened to. He emerged as their champion, the champion of straight speaking, and sort of taking the politically correct shackles off of what you could and could not say. So I think that the general feeling right now, as I've interpreted it in the U.S. and from what I've felt from many visits back to the U.S. over the recent years, is that this is all coming to a head to a certain extent in these elections, and we'll see how, especially after these most recent incidents, how that leads to people going to the polls and expressing themselves.
Now, on that subject of galvanizing people to vote, a Harvard poll out this week has found that a record number of young people are planning to vote, as many as 40%. That's more than double the number of people who turned out for midterms in 2014. It's notoriously difficult to get people in that 18 to 29 year age group to get out to the polls. So what's changed this time around?
I think the shock of the 2016 election is one of the galvanizing or one of the motivating factors. Taking it back to 2016, I think one of the most remarkable aspects, at least for Democrats, looking at what went wrong in that election, was the sense that a lot of the young people, a lot of the folks who made up this coalition that supported Barack Obama in 2008 and then in 2012 didn't come out in 2016 to vote. They'd either been disillusioned or they had decided to go with Trump for whatever reason. And now I think after 2 years of Trump and with the accumulation of anger on the left side of the political spectrum, I think that partly, I won't say entirely, explains this poll finding. I heard about it. I haven't actually read it. And so one of the first questions I would have is how many of those young people who feel like they're mobilized to vote will actually come out to vote for Trump, or the Trump side, the Republicans, as opposed to Democrats, the sort of the anti-Trump. That's the big question that's out there. And as you said, saying that you're fired up and you're ready to go and vote is one thing. Actually showing up at the polling station or actually having gone through the voter registration process is another.
Right. Now, let's take a look at what's at stake in these polls. Predictions are that the Democrats will end up controlling the House. Republicans will keep control of the Senate. These elections, however, also set the stage for campaigns in 2020, the next presidential elections. Now, apart from the obvious goal of grabbing seats in Congress, what do these midterms mean, in particular for the Democrats going forward? So win or lose the House, do they have a clear strategy?
Well, I think that's maybe part of the answer to your question is how central to the Democratic strategy is gaining at least control of the House. I think that it's going to be a much more difficult situation for the Democrats if they don't retake at least the House, because then on a national level, the Republicans will probably double down to force through as many of the things on Trump's agenda that have not yet happened because of the narrow majorities that the Republicans have had in both houses, and especially the Senate. So I suspect that what's going to happen is you're going to have, if the Democrats don't gain the House, you're going to find the Democrats shifting to the state level in the hope that they're really going to pick up a number of governorships, and they're going to be able to set the stage after the 2020 elections for reapportionment of a realignment of constituencies and things like that. There's a lot that is going on right now, and I stress this, outside of the federal level or below the federal level, at the state level, that the Democrats have to get a better handle on, because right now the Republicans have got the upper hand, even though in many regards they're on the losing side demographically in terms of their base, but they're able at the state level to change the rules in terms of voter registration and in terms of setting up the constituency districts to be able to stack things in their favor. So the Democrats, if they win the House, I think it's going to be a choice between blocking the Republicans at all levels, as the Republicans did to them, or trying to set up a more constructive, forward-looking approach to how, if they retake the White House, they would actually plan to govern.
Right. Now, looking again at an even wider picture, economists worry about how the US trade war with China, among other things, will play out in the long term in the US. Now, Americans aren't feeling the pinch yet, because I suppose the trickle-down effect of tariffs takes some time before it affects wages and employment, prices, etc. How do Americans see their economy, and what are they making of these tit-for-tat tariffs with China?
I think the tit-for-tat tariffs with China issue is very localized. I was listening to something, in fact, just today on NPR about how, depending on where you are in the country and what local industry is doing in the United States, you may or may not have been affected by the tariffs yet. But in those places where the tariffs have already hit, those places where imported steel is important, and it's not just with China, it's also the tariffs on Mexican steel. That's having an impact already, and that does seem to be affecting how people are approaching these midterm elections. As you said, a lot of the rest of the effects are going to come down the road. And people have not yet seen, because so far what they've been mostly affected by is cuts in taxes, so they've had more money in their pockets. They haven't necessarily noticed rising prices, or they haven't been as sensitive to that. But if the inflationary trends in the United States continue, that will become more and more of a factor. And that's where I think, in about a year, the Trump administration is going to be facing some serious problems in terms of economically driven opposition.
Okay, thanks very much, William Jordan. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Lots more to talk about. These elections just 1 week out. We'll be following the elections throughout the next week. That's it for Paris Live PM.